last module, we have said that macro context of our talk, of our discourse, puts limits on us. These limits are called frame. And in this module, you will see how this frame controls our talk. We see now how macro contexts shape the local context. This is what I have told you in the introduction. When we analyze institutional discourses, the talk in a court, the talk in a clinic, the talk in a bank, institutional discourse, we try to find out the dominant frame in discourses which regulate the talk, and we have to follow that frame in that particular institution. What are these frames? These frames are patterns which are prominent because they block other patterns. There are so many patterns of talk, but there is one dominant pattern. That dominant pattern of talk is called frame. And this frame is linked with institutional norms and rules which control our talk in that institution. For example, you are in a clinic. If you see doctor-patient talk, or you have experienced, God forbidding, talk between you and your doctor, doctor asks more questions and controls the information. He asks you questions and then you answer. This is the pattern of talk. The questions are only about illness. They are not about where you went for a trip during this summer vacation or etc. No personal talk. This is only about your medical problem, illness. But if you observe nurse-patient talk, this will be totally different. It will have another type of frame. The dominant frame allows more talk. Patients can even over-inform about their illness. They don't just tell about their illness, they tell about the history of their illness and the remedies which different people suggested, and everything personal and impersonal is talked about. And this is allowed by the nurse. Information is not fully controlled here. In both talks, doctor-patient and nurse-patient, one member asks questions and the other is silent. Okay, when one speaks, one is speaker, the other is listener. This is a frame, but both frames are different, you know. These are two frames which we have discussed here through these examples. So this is the frame which is imposed on micro interactions by social institution, by the hospital, by the medical institution. The frame of doctor-patient talk comes from a norm of joint family. Now see how institutional discourse is linked with societal discourse. In society, such kind of talk, such kind of frame or pattern or style of talk or sequence of talk, this is also found in joint family. In a joint family, you all know that mother questions about ill health and the ailing member of the family listens to her. Mother at home and doctor in hospital get this power from where? From the social positions that a doctor holds in hospital and mother holds at home. The questions have key functions. The questions which they ask, actually they implement the frame. They set the sequence of talk, who will speak and who will listen. Number two, they show how the respondent is viewed. Respondent is just a patient. A respondent is a patient and a friend. How the respondent is viewed. The presuppositions of the questions do ideological work. Now, presupposition, I would define this term. What we presuppose, what we assume before we utter something, before we talk about something. So, those assumptions are called presupposition. So, now, when we talk in certain institutional context, so we have certain assumptions in our mind. Those assumptions are converted into questions. So, what I am calling assumptions, they are frames. The frames are converted into questions. The background assumptions are called presuppositions. For example, I have here some examples to clarify the concept of presupposition. For example, if you ask someone, are you friends? So, it presupposes these double arrows, double angle signs, they stand for presupposes. Yani you presuppose either you are friends or not. Okay. Are you friends? So, you presuppose this person may or may not be friend with the other person, of the other person, sorry. Where do you meet each other? This is again a question. So, before you utter this question, there are some assumptions in your mind. And that assumption this time is somewhere you meet each other. Where do you meet each other? It means you meet each other somewhere at certain location. So, you have assumption about location. So, this assumption is presupposition. So, we conclude that to understand how micro level talks reproduce, generalize, spread ideology or norms of an institute, we have to identify the frame, the dominant pattern of the talk that is common, that is allowed in the institutional context. Frames are the sequences of talk which are controlled by the dominant person. So, in these frames, one of the talkers is dominant, active, the other is passive. Who will be active, who will be passive? This is determined by the frame. And one of the frames that we have talked about in this module is question silence frame. One asks the question and other remains silent.